Welcome to this Almedalen session of Northern Impact, which is actually the first time that this organization participates in Almedalen. We have, for this year's Almedalen, we have two panels, two sessions. They are right back to back. This is the first one. There will be another one coming right after our session. And it is definitely my pleasure, therefore, to be the one who gets to do the Almedalen debut of Northern Impact. Quickly about the organization before we start. This is a quite new organization. Our Northern Impact focuses on building bridges, connecting dots between different entities working towards sustainable development, specifically in the Nordic region, but also with our eyes looking from the Nordics outwards to the world, and also with a certain kind of twist towards the more technical contents, the more technical solutions, if you will, for sustainability and everything, of course, that comes around that. We have, over the year that we have been existing, so we were basically founded 1 year ago, we have been working with topics such as recyclability of metals. We have been looking at climate funding also from a sort of like entrepreneurial perspective, which is also something that the next panel will explore a little bit. And also in general, kind of a sustainability framework for how we move forward, how we have dialogues regarding sustainable transformation, what is important when a startup approaches the wider field of the area where they want to have a disruptive new technology to change things for the good faster, and what ecosystem can contribute to their success through research, through more established companies and the know-how that circulates. The Northern Impact is essentially like the bridge builder between all of these islands, connecting all of these dots, and that's also the point of our presence here in Almedalen. And today we will specifically be discussing resilient communities, so how to build resilient communities. We will resilience, of course, having many different meanings in this context, and that's also what we will be touching upon in the different with different speakers here today. We are going to explore how to build resilient communities, again a little bit from the Nordic perspective, looking at how this is addressed in the Nordic countries and the Baltic states as well. We are pleased to have also one panelist from Latvia here with us today. And the scope will be essentially to explore this topic from the point of view of various different experts in fields related to sustainability, climate, and resilience building, who are based in different Nordic countries and Baltic states as well. So welcome once again to Northern Impact's debut Almedalen seminar. My name is Sakke Terikoski, and I will soon proceed to introducing the panel as well. The way this will work is that we will be having a first part of the discussion, just a general introduction from everybody, and first introductions from everybody also to the topic of discussion. And we are going to afterwards have a moderated discussion hosted by me, your moderator today. And after this, we are also able to take in questions from the audience. Prajit, Director of Northern Impact, is in the panel, but also serving as our technical guide today. Prajit, I will, to begin with, just leave you the floor to explain how people watching us can ask question to.
Yeah, so hello everyone. So this is also broadcasted in one of our partner organization from the AFRIS space. So definitely it is also been broadcasted there. So if there is any question and all, they can put up in the chat, or maybe just ask through one of our moderators there. And people are already joining, you can see. So yeah, feel free to ask question from an on-site Almedalen feature, but most of our panelists are virtually, so we have to do it over in the Teams. So yeah, that's how it is.
All right, then let's start our round of introductions from everybody. We will start with Sara Nyberg. Sara, she works with sustainability consulting as her daytime job, and she's also has a strong track record from being a driving force between many youth organizations that are focusing on climate and sustainability and the energy transition also in particular. Push Sweden and Yes Europe are two of these organizations that Sara has been active in before, and yeah, you will be talking a little bit more about this topic right now. Best practice in community development, sustainability in the context, and of course, looking also a little bit more deeply in the renewables. But I will leave the details to you. So please, Sara.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to speak here. So yeah, just to say a bit, some more words about myself. So yeah, I'm working like professionally as a consultant at a company called South Pole. So I calculate the carbon footprint of companies, help them set targets in line with climate science, and develop emission reduction roadmaps. But today I will speak more based on my engagements that I've had the last years. I believe it's almost 15 years that I've been involved in different organizations. It started in school in the sustainability committee. Yeah, the last years I've been more involved in Push Sweden, where actually also Linda is involved, but also Yes Europe. And Yes Europe is, it stands for Young Leaders in Energy and Sustainability Europe. So I will focus a bit more on that role, since I know Linda is more representing Push today, I believe. So yeah, it's an organization for young people who are interested in energy and sustainability, and where we have teams all over Europe which are doing activities related to energy and sustainability. And yeah, we want to have an impact on, and a positive impact on, the sustainable energy transition. So yeah, that's a bit more about me, and so a bit to my starting words, like some main messages related to this topic. So building resilient communities. So as you heard, I've been active for a long time. So I will briefly mention 3 aspects, starting from personal resilience to resilience in organization, and then come to resilient energy systems. So I'll touch upon them briefly, but I hope to say more about these during the panel discussion. But just starting with personal resilience, is that I've been very involved in different organizations and often took engagements here and there, and sometimes there's maybe not so many active members. So then you say, okay, I can take this role on, even if I, as it was in my situation, already had a lot of active engagements. But I mean, that led me to often doing like the to-dos for the engagements late in the evenings, after work or after studies, after having a call with the organization, and then I did to-dos. And that's why I like came to bed late and slept little, so that was not very good for my personal health. So my first message or learning is like, make sure to first take care of your health to be resilient on an individual level, so that you have energy for, secondly, work or studies. And ideally you can do work or studies related to sustainability. And third comes voluntary engagement. So even if many are very passionate, just like I've also heard about many who have burnt out. So take care of yourself to have good energy, to do good at work. And then third comes voluntary engagement.
So would you say, Sara, there's a clear parallel here then, that you have like the personal perspective as well as the kind of like the global perspective, maybe even on sustainability, that one should first take care of oneself in order to be able to take care of the planet?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I couldn't have said better. Yeah. I know maybe my time is out. I should leave the room for the others. But yeah, just quickly about resilience in organizations, I can just say like we both, Yes Europe and Push Sweden, were affected by COVID, but we just changed to having online events instead of in-person events. So we could kind of adapt. Since we're quite small organizations, we could adapt in that way. And then about resilience in energy systems, I can just say, since I also studied energy systems engineering in my master's, I have knowledge on energy systems. And just a quick note on that one is that it might be obvious for some, but to have more resilient energy systems, renewable energy is a great way for that, and ideally distributed renewable energy, local production, so that we're not dependent on one central coal power plant or one central nuclear power plant, but have more distributed energy production and more renewable electricity production, because we have seen that the prices on natural gas, for example, have risen a lot the last year. So yeah, that's those were my opening words, and I look forward to hear from the others.
Thank you, Sara. And we will rotate in the Nordics over from Sweden to Finland next. Tina, you're up. Tina is the CEO and co-founder of SUStory, meaning Sustainable Stories. And that means also that Tina is much better at introducing herself, because after all, she is the one making the stories about sustainability. So even in her speaker pitch, I will save to Tina. But just to say a few words about Tina first, before then, she works with lifting positive stories related to the transitions of sustainability and thereby inspiring others to make positive change. SUStory is not the only platform Tina is active in. Tina has many things happening in her portfolio right now. The 2022 Initiative Foundation is also one of them. So she has been in a leading role there. And that was actually also one of the organizations active behind the scenes to bring the Stockholm Plus 50 environmental conference to Stockholm last year. But with that said, I'll let Tina introduce herself in more detail. And Tina, please, what's your angle to building resilient communities?
Thank you, Sakke. First of all, thank you for raising this topic and bringing together so many different voices to talk about this. I think that that's an amazing thing, and post the pandemic, and actually many things before the pandemic, and with things that are happening in the world, this topic and theme is very important for us to have share some information on. As you said, I do wear many hats. So on the 2022 Initiative Foundation, I'm the chair of the board, and we are working on accelerating sustainable ambitions. And then I also recently became the director of development for World Upshift Movement. So all of these tie together in the way that we're trying to, or not trying to, we are inspiring people to move and also to challenge the way that we're thinking, and even allowing people or encouraging them to have fun when doing it. So we're saying that it's not bad to be joyful when doing this transition. It's not easy, let's not be unclear about that, but you are allowed to have a bit of fun when doing this. My standpoint on this is that I do think that there are certain things from the Nordics that are alternative approaches to how we can deal with these issues. And one thing that comes to mind when speaking about communities or businesses or government is that we actually engage in a very active debate and dialogue between the different groups. And we are very much encouraging critical voices to that dialogue. So it's not only this yes, 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 but actually inviting and encouraging critical voices and opposing opinions to that table, which I think is definitely something that is extremely inspiring. So we do recognize the opposite voices, and we're not looking necessarily always for compromises, but consensus, meaning that we give a standing point and we give legitimation for the different viewpoints and see them as important. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing is around this, having these dialogues and discussions, and the opportunity to convince the ones that you don't like about the opinion that you have, and for them to have the chance to convince you about why they see your opinion as challenging. One thing that I want to bring forward in all of this is that, first of all, with the sustainability challenges that we have and the other challenges, I do see a lot of hope. Humanity has been able to upshift and pivot previously, and I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to do that currently. One challenge that I put on all of this is that this pivoting will happen when it makes sense. And we are currently moving down a pathway where we're actually asking for a lot of compliance, which is again great in the Nordics because we're really good at reporting. But I'm not completely sure that will lead to the action that we want to see. So this, how do you get the communities to actually pivot, and how do you get these things to make sense to them? That's definitely a challenge that we're facing today. And then another thing that I would want to bring into this conversation, which it comes from my background working with people and working with communities in very different settings and in these dialogues and debates between different actors, is that we're talking about resilience, and in some cases we're climate change, the energy crisis, pandemic, all of these, they are huge things to deal with. But we tend to try to solve them. If someone gets depressed or if someone gets anxious, we're like putting that person into therapy. But these are collective things. You can't build that. you can't build that resilience only in one individual when the problems are so large and big. So you're very much going to have to work on it in a collective way. And that resilience is built very much in collective. So that's why I like the part that people are working with communities here as well. So yeah, so that's maybe my standpoint. I can see that my video stopped working, so I'm going to turn it off and turn it on again and see if it starts working again. But that's my views. Thank you so much for being here and really looking forward to the discussion.
All right, we continue rotating around the Baltic Sea and land in Latvia next. So Christiana will be able to give her short introduction. Christiana is an climate and sustainability advocate for multiple youth organizations in the past, and nowadays she's focused on ESG reporting as a consultant for sustainability. She will talk about the sustainable transition of the private sector and how that is linked to the building of resilient communities in the local and regional and also wider context, and of course also bring what she brings with her from her earlier active years in youth associations. Please, Christiana, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you for having me. And as you just said, nowadays I'm working with the businesses, with the companies in Latvia, but also a little bit in Estonia. And we have projects also that are led by European Union that we are working on. And I will try to bring this business and from different sectors, from financial to non-financial sectors, opinions, challenges to today's discussion. One of the things that was already said by Tina, yes, the businesses are really interesting and you have to learn how to work together. That's one of the challenges that also businesses are facing, because when they're writing their sustainability reports, they need to engage with their stakeholders. They need to have also dialogue going on and assess what kind of impact they have to the local communities where the company is situated. And then, as I have been part of a few of the processes as the moderator of these discussions, there's moments when companies are just sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is going in some direction that we haven't think about it. There's also a lot of great opportunities arising from these discussions on new corporation models, because we have our way, I think, in corporate at least, where we know certain ways how we are talking. And then when you go to this talk about sustainability, this is new opportunities. You talk about topics that you have never talked about before. So this is really interesting, and I hope that my participation will be valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we move over back to Sweden then. We have Katarina next. Katarina, she is the CEO of Nudged. So that's an organization offering digital solutions and advisory within the field of behavioral science. So now we are sort of back to motivating people to be sustainable, act sustainably, and for companies all to kind of like transition in their minds and then in their actions to sustainability. Katarina will explain nudging more in detail, I'm sure, in her introductions. Before I leave the floor to Katarina, I should say that she is also active in an organization called Climate Reality, and this is a global organization with people all over the world in different ways, contributing to sustainability in their local context and by extension globally. And she has also been the chapter lead of the Nordic countries in this organization itself. But I will leave over the floor to Katarina to talk more.
Thank you very much. I just had to quickly change setting because I'm actually in Almedalen in the garden, and it just started another seminar behind me. So I hope the audio works anyways with this outdoor setting. Nice to be here. I'm Katarina Pauli, and I come from the business community, from the business side. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm Nudged, where I'm active right now, is my 5th company, and it's all been within sustainability. So that's my background. So also in my work in Climate Reality, that is Al Gore's global network of climate leaders in the world. I am active in their business initiative and also how to introduce the climate agenda as a really important topic to be on every board meeting. So we educate board members to put climate first on the agenda. So my company is called Nudged. We are experts on behavioral change and a behavioral scientific method called nudging. And very short, it comes from the English word nudge, like giving a friendly push in the right direction. And it's behavioral science and psychology and design, where instead of trying to change the people, we change the situation. So it's the most convenient, easiest, and most intuitive choice should be the sustainable choice. So by working with choice architecture and arranging different choice situations, both online and offline in our society, we could make it more easy to make a sustainable choice. So at Nudged, we are a team of 12 people. We are behavioral scientists, we're climate change experts, and we are techies. And we have a SaaS platform, and we also do consulting work in this field in 6 different countries at the moment. So I'm going to stop there, and I look forward to talking today about how we can have tech and business and behavioral to go hand in hand. Because I believe that the key to solving resilient communities is not only talking about technical solutions for the future, but also our behaviors, our social norms, how we build engagement and a feeling of belonging, and how we can work together in this very important time that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's also something that we should continue, of course, also after this panel. That's what Nordic Impact is, after all about. But to close off our circle, let's move on to the next speaker. We have Linda next. Linda, she is, like Sarah said earlier, also has a background in Push Sweden, and Linda has recently written about the role of climate finance globally, and that's what she will be talking about today, among other things. So she looks out from the Nordic region towards the global context in this sense, and will speak about the role of Nordic countries and like the rich countries in the global north in climate finance, global climate diplomacy, and the inclusion of all the relevant stakeholders in the effort to build resilient communities across the globe. So Linda, floor is yours. Welcome to Nordic Impact's panel.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you also for inviting me to this panel discussion. So yeah, the importance of creating communities that can withstand all kinds of shocks have become increasingly evident, especially in the era of the changing climate. And I'm glad to discuss this topic here today with you. So yeah, I recently completed my master's degree in Lund in climate change strategies. And yes, my thesis uncovers how multilateral development banks can strengthen their climate and disaster resilience financing in small island development states and least developed countries, and how stakeholder engagement can be advantageous in these endeavors. So yeah, I previously interned at the UN Climate Change, so the UNFCCC, and also a Nordic Research Institute that works with regional planning and development. So that is my background. I also have been the international coordinator of Push Sweden, as Sarah has told, and she was also my predecessor. So that's very nice to rejoin here with her. So yeah, first and foremost, let's just consider the fact that last year the global average temperature exceeded 1.15 degrees from the pre-industrial levels. And this might not appear significant, but it truly is. And this means more frequent and intense weather events and slow-moving climate hazards. And these are not anecdotal anymore. And these are threatening the lives and livelihoods of billions of people all over the world. And yeah, some countries are those countries that are most severely impacted by climate change are often the ones who have the least resources to adapt to the effects of climate change and recover from disasters. However, these extreme climate events are not longer limited to the global south, as they are felt here in the north as well. And especially the most marginalized and vulnerable communities, such as the indigenous peoples in the Arctic and others, they have a harder time adapting to the new climate and recovering from these disasters. Also, some business sectors such as agriculture and public infrastructure, health and electricity, they are already being impacted here in the north as well. So yeah, building resilience and disaster risk management and adaptation should be integrated into every government policy, also here in the Nordics. Yeah, so I have a background in finance, climate finance. So from my perspective, it is important that we invest in resilience and adaptation, both here in the global north, but also in the global south. So yeah, I'm happy to discuss more about these topics later on. So thank you so much. And yeah, thank you very much for being here. And I'm looking forward to all these discussions.
Thank you, Linda. And then we move to Prajit. Prajit, he is the director of Nordic Impact, like I already said in the earlier introduction. And maybe to also, with your introduction, Prajit, kicking off the discussion from the point of view of like Nordic Impact and our own mission and agenda, how do you find the things you have now heard from the other panelists? That's one question for you. And then, of course, from your own contributions to this panel, Prajit is a person who comes with expertise on AI and digitalization and blockchain. So he will complement also this panel with the views on how digital technology can be used to improve the making of resilient communities. So that's the second question for you. Short this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sake. Yeah, it was nice to hear all the introductions about every panelist and also their take on how they're gonna see these resilience movements and all the sustainability. Myself, yeah, I'm an AI research scientist working for an organization called AFRI, and also we are associated with a non-profit called Nordic Impact. And when it comes to when I see a digitalization, or especially with AI and the sustainability, I see a big leap we are taking, because the digitalization technology is a very clean technology you can think of, and also it helps you in terms of optimizations or kind of doing implementations in such a way that your resources are wisely utilized. In all these things, definitely it generates less carbon footprint. It makes communication easier. It gets the work done. It can be in any form. It can be whether it is in the power grids, whether it's kind of a supply chain, whether it kinds of a security or something, anything with that. So definitely, we cannot think of a society which doesn't think about incorporating digitalization and think of the future, right? The future is all about digitalization. It's all about connectivity. It's all about resource management in the best utilization possible. So that's how I see it in short. Yes, Sake, over to you.
Thank you, Prajit. Now, I would like to turn to those of you who are working closely with companies, and that goes for specifically Katarina and Christiana in this case. When you are in touch with the companies and you discuss sustainability, how much is the resilience of the surrounding community discussed, and how interested are companies in general to kind of factor in also for example, resilience towards I don't know, disasters like Linda mentioned, or extreme weather like also Sara mentioned, energy prices, fluctuations for that matter. How big of discussion topics are these elements with the companies that you are meeting and discussing with in your daily basis?
I can start. I think it varies depending on both size of the company, what country the company is placed in and has business in, and also what type of sector you're in. when it comes to startups, I think most startups realize that there's if you can build in sustainability already from the beginning in your business model, that is definitely a win. So that I see much more now than compared to 5-10 years ago. But in the bigger corporations, it's still very, very slow. They realize now with the new reporting and everything, they realize they need to address this. But they are still a bit afraid of where first they need to know where to start, and then they're a bit afraid of communicating what they're actually doing. um, I know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term green hushing, meaning that some companies actually do a lot for climate, for example, but they are afraid of speaking of it because, for example, the environmental movement can be really hard on them if they're not 100% there. So that slows things down a bit also. I think there's a lot of potential to move things quicker if we can share both best practices, but also sharing lessons learned and what didn't work, sharing failures more. I think that's how you build resilience on sharing both sides of this journey that we're on. And I feel that bigger corporations are a bit more hesitant towards that compared to startups and SMEs. But then on the other hand, you have other businesses that are super interested and really informed and know that we need to act on this. I had a conversation with a global insurance company just a couple of weeks ago, where we discussed we're going to work together with them with our SaaS platform, and they could immediately calculate that they could save $1 million a year just by working with behavioral change towards their customers. They're not gonna make money out of that, but just by building their customers being more resilient to climate change and changing their behaviors in households, for example, and being see how their homes can be better secured towards climate effects. That alone can save a lot of money for the insurance companies. So depends on the sector, I would say.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what just Katarina said, and my opinion and how I see it, not only in Latvia, but talking with colleagues in Estonia and Lithuania, that in case of our states, this legislation, this obligation that you now need to report CSRD for those who maybe know a little bit of what's going on in Europe, are the driving force why companies are actually thinking about their sustainability report. This is the driving force why they are talking about their stakeholders. And for some companies, yeah, they are not really happy about it, that they have to do it now. Other companies are, oh yes, nice, we are doing this and it's amazing, even if we don't have this obligation to report. I know there's a little bit of differences when legally talking with Nordics and Baltics at this point, because when the non-financial reporting directive came in force, Nordics adopted quite strong measures. So there's not a lot of change when CSRDs came in force. In Latvia and Baltic states, we did quite opposite, bare minimum. So now all companies are now, okay, what we are doing, what's happening. But it also points out really importantly that no matter what the company is, the person who is leading the sustainability, does it mean that it's like a job title or it's informal group? It depends on the company. If the person knows what ESG sustainability means, if the person is passionate, then the progress in 1 year from company who do something, maybe not really aware what they are doing or not doing, can progress to being a really good starting point for their ESG journey, strong understanding what's their strategy, what they want to achieve.
So there is like a growth journey basically for every company and their sustainability department. It comes very nicely then with a bridge over to Tina, because of course every growth journey is also a success story. So I see, Tina, that you had your hand up, so I will let you give your remark.
Yeah, so thank you for those answers, and I want to, and I'll get to these like positive stories in a bit, But building on what was said about failure, I think that we do have a problem at the moment with the businesses in regards of them they feeling pressure to be able to say that, yeah, we know what's going on and we have full clarity on this. And then in the background, they feel very insecure. They don't necessarily have the information, but still struggling to be able to admit that or feeling almost embarrassed with that. And I think that that's a problem that we have been not necessarily within the organizations, but it's a systemic problem. It is the communities and the customers and everyone who's expecting these leaders to have all the answers in things that are extremely complicated. They're complex, it's complicated. They are even wicked in one way, all of these problems. So I think that there is a lot of things that need to happen in order to support these organizations to actually be quite honest and say, look, we don't know, but we're figuring it out. And there's going to be failure, but it doesn't mean that our ambitions or efforts are going to be any less. And I think that that is a part of those success stories. So it's not only, and we're really good at talking about the things that we have figured out within businesses and communities, but I think that it makes, so it inspires so much change because everyone is struggling with this. Even we as experts are struggling with this, like new legislation and new expectations and everything are coming, and communities, customers are saying that they're behaving in one way, but they're behaving differently and all of this. So all of us are struggling with this. And I think that if we could talk more about how we're struggling and how we're overcoming that, that will have a significant change, and that will help people make sense of all of this. It's not all like fairy tales. And those are the success stories that we're trying to say, and how much effort and time and failure goes in building that success, building that resilience. And I think that's kind of like the key.
Very important points. Thank you, Tina. Christiana, I will give you the word quickly before moving on with questions.
Yes, really short remark. I agree that people are really afraid to talk about what they don't know. But the problem is that also governments doesn't know, and they are not talking about it, but they are expecting that there would be this magical bridge that they don't know, but companies somehow will know. And I'm working now in a project where we are writing roadmap for Latvia and Estonia to implement EU taxonomy regulation. And we are actually working on suggestion about these sustainability platforms there, that there need to be a public databases. And you look at the government and they're like, okay, this is cool, this is fun, let's do this, but we don't know how. And then when you're communicating again in workshops with companies, with other public entities, this I don't know how is like elephant that nobody's touching. We know we are here, we need to get there. How? We will somehow figure it out, hopefully.
So while countries are figuring out how to do things and figuring out the technical details more specifically, then they are at the same time also figuring out the financial details on how to do the climate financing. So I will turn to Linda next. While our governments in the Nordic and Baltic region is still figuring out the technical details of resilience, how are we doing in terms of contributing globally to funding all of the transition needs to happen?
Yes, thank you for the question. So yes, there is this $100 billion US dollars goal of climate change, climate finance every year from the global north to the global south. And this goal was established in 2009 at COP15, so Conference of the Parties in Copenhagen. But since then, it has never been achieved. And so we need trillions of US dollars, and not even this 100 billion goal has never been achieved. And but here I must commend the Nordic countries for the substantial contributions to this goal, but still it is lacking. And so the supplements, the government decisions, the donations the participation of the private sector and financial institutions, including the Nordic ones, they can play a vital role in mobilizing this climate finance to resilience, adaptation, as well as mitigation. So yeah, we need to do more, even though we are doing something, but it's not sufficient yet.
All right, I will turn to Sara next. Comment on this.
Yes, thank you. To comment on Linda, like maybe as one possible solution or one way to, because I just wanted to say that, like, yeah, we need also not only governments but private companies, the private sector, such as companies, to contribute with climate finance. And there, now I'm speaking not from my engagements, but from my like professional role at South Pole, that like one way is for companies to invest in to do climate finance via climate projects, so that they purchase so-called carbon credits, and through that they contribute with climate finance to Global South, to projects which are avoiding emissions. So otherwise emissions would have been emitted, but through this project they are avoided, or even a concrete emission reduction or like reductions. So for example, like tree plant, like deforestation reduction or reforestation, so which actually take up CO2 from the atmosphere. So through that, I mean, I come from an environmental background and have like traditionally like a critical view on this, what you also call carbon offsetting. But now, I mean, but since I also have participated in many of the UN climate conferences and have this view of the urgency of the climate finance from Global North to Global South, from, let's say, more rich countries to less rich countries, then it's really needed, this money. So companies which have money can then like offset their emissions if they want, and then thereby contributing with climate finance to Global South. So that's one possibility as well.
And one way of doing this would then be to devise these kind of climate projects that through which one can make sure that emissions are avoided. And this is, of course, something that many institutions and companies in the Nordic countries are actively working on. And we can explore that, of course, later on in the panel. But I want to kind of just stay with you, Sara, for a moment, because I wanted to ask you about the sort of engagement perspective as well. You in your introduction mentioned Yes Europe, which is the organization where you're active in, but we didn't, I think, mention what Yes Europe stands for. That's an abbreviation meaning Young Leaders in Energy and Sustainability. And Europe is the context in which this organization operates internationally and then locally in different countries. Back to success stories now. Can you name one success story from Yes Europe where the organization worked on sort of building the sentiment of resilience in their local communities, or in a European-wide setting for that matter?
Yes, sure, absolutely. And I can just say I mentioned maybe briefly, but also my role in Yes Europe was first that I was just attending the annual conference, which was in Netherlands. And after that, they asked me if I wanted to start a team in Sweden. So after that, I started a local team, a local chapter in Sweden. So I became the country representative for Yes Europe in Sweden. And I was that for around a year. And then I changed to the role CR lead, or country representative lead. So then I was coordinating around 20 country representatives across Yes Europe, and like my role was to support them, to motivate them, to be active, and then and now I recently handed over that role, but I'm still a bit active in the organization. But then if I should try to say one concrete example of first of all, like organizational resilience. So in Sweden, we just had our very first kickoff in January 2020. And then 2 months later, like COVID struck, and we were so excited about organizing in-person events and study visits and so on. But then COVID came and we're like, no, we can't do any in-person events. But then we were like, as you know, many other organizations did like online events, so such as this one. So during that spring, we organized 3 webinars with different speakers, and so since we were like kind of small and fast moving, we could adapt to the COVID situation and yeah, organize things online instead. And a second example of maybe being economically resilient is, I mean, we know with the global situation also with COVID and so, I mean, there has been a lot of economic effects. But then as a voluntary organization, if you don't have so much spending, you are not so affected if you have less money. So, I mean, our ambition is to grow, of course, but since we in Yes Europe, like from the start, didn't have an like membership fee or so, because it should be easy to become a member. So therefore we didn't have so much expenses. So therefore, like, we weren't any dependent or so on some kind of funding because we didn't have so much expenses. But instead we were looking for specific projects, and for specific occasions we were then like collaborating with companies or so to get money for specific things. So we could like plan that ahead. Okay, we want to buy something for this event, so therefore we find a company and can fund this. So that's maybe a way of being a bit economically resilient as well, by not having so much expenses.
And from the company's perspective, this contributes to making youth more educated on these matters and more networked to be able to then quicker make their part of the energy transition in this particular context. And that is also very important of building resilience, because of course you then introduce this knowledge in many different points, in many different locations, in one new age group essentially, and of course this pattern continues from generation to generation, hopefully. Moving back to now the technical details that governments need to figure out. Prajit, from a tech expert point of view, how do you see this? Like, how do we technical experts like communicate with our decision makers to push them in the right direction, if you will?
In my experience in Sweden with all this technical implementation, the first and foremost thing is to go with the basic POCs. Just try it out in a very small scale, or in a scale which doesn't impact in a bigger community. Try to see it out. Like, for example, from AFRI, we did a project called TourNet. It's a consortium of multiple real estate companies, and they wanted to build this sustainable. They wanted to build a sustainable community, or a kind of the square of multiple buildings, where also this nudging factor was very important, where you can how you can save energy, how you can make the how you can support the sustainability by not using so much of energy, or by using some alternative resources and all. So in that factor we were using AI to nudge the habitants in the society. But if you think it in a broader way, it can go wrong. Instead of nudging, it can make you do other things also. And for to push this project from our side, it was very difficult. So then what we did, like, we took up a small segment. Okay, we are doing some POCs, it's like a public-private partnership. We will have some kind of a partnership in the project, in the IP, and you will also have it. And then we implement it, see the results, and then we scale up. So luckily in Nordics, the government is kind of appreciating this type of technologies compared to other parts in the world. Maybe the developed parts in the world also, when it comes to like US and other. But yeah, that's how we push it forward. I think Katrina has something to add.
Katrina has a question to you.
I needed to add to that, because you said that it could also, when you use AI for nudging, it could also go in the wrong direction. And I would really like to emphasize that sometimes nudging is unfortunately used in the wrong context, because a lot of tech companies call it nudging. But to be able to be called a nudge, it needs to be in the benefit of both the individual and the society alike, meaning that you cannot really say that it's nudging when you're trying to manipulate someone to doing something they don't want, or it's not that is not good for our society. That is a wrong use of that word, I would say. With that said, I do think that AI will will, and it is already becoming more and more important, and will play an important role in how to use behavioral science and changing our behaviors for the future, and also building communities. So I'm really excited about the times that we're in, and what's going to come ahead in that sense.
Thank you.
It is indeed very exciting. Thank you very much, hey panel. This has been a very good discussion so far. People in the audience, please also ask questions. It's now it's just like kind of free for all. You can panelists can ask questions to each other. Audience can ask questions to anybody in the panel, either everybody or specific people. You do this, audience, you simply do this by writing the questions in the chat. People who are watching this later on can of course not do that, but maybe in the YouTube comments, then you can post something.
And also I would like to, and also I'd like to mention our partner AFRI in the in-house. If there are some questions and all, just unmute, or maybe you can just write it up chat through our media contact person in AFRI. Yeah, Maria, thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's start with Katarina.
Yeah, I was we were discussing best practices and success stories some minutes ago, and that made me come and think about one success story that I do think we definitely can learn from. When it comes to energy efficiency and how cutting peak hours and having people to switch to more fossil-free alternatives, there has been a lot of research on how important communities are in this matter. And for those of you who've been living in the Nordics the Baltics this winter, you know that the energy questions has been on everyone's lips. So for the first time, we're like discussing our energy bills on the Friday dinner setting, and comparing our energy usage with each other. And we have actually done a really interesting work together with Varberg Energi. It's an energy utility company in Sweden, and we presented that here in Almedalen yesterday, where we have been nudging as a layer within their household app. So the end users of the energy usage, they could see their bills and how much they're consuming and their peaks. And then we have our SaaS platform being one nudging layer that, depending on how you use energy, you get energy advice and you get nudges towards changing that. And one nudge that we implemented that has been proven time after time in research studies in both US and different parts of the world is that if you compare your energy usage with your neighbor's energy usage, that triggers both a competitive instinct for us that you don't want to be less efficient than your neighbor, but at the same time it also triggers this feeling of belonging, that we're doing something together as a community. If they can switch to fossil-free alternative or solar panels, then so could we. If they don't need to pay more of an energy bill because they're thinking about their behavior and their energy usage and trying to be save as much as possible, then so could we. So you don't want to
this neighbor anecdote, of course, you can also compare to Nordic countries, right? Because that's usually
exactly, sure, on a systemic level, right?
I have a remark from Tina also. You can end your sentence if you want.
Yes, but this is I saw a number from a US study that this could actually save 450 tons of CO2 per year. So there's a lot of things that just triggering that psychological effect and the community feeling is very, very powerful in this.
A lot of potential. Tina, please.
I'm just gonna move into the Linda, who has been the only one basically bringing the paradox in all of this, that yes, we need to talk about the success stories, and we might not be talking enough about good success stories, but at the same time we have the other paradox, which is this panic, chaos, everything is going badly, no of the problems are being solved, the trend is absolutely the opposite in comparison to all of these success stories. So we have this interesting paradigm that is currently happening. And coming back to behavior and communities and so forth, there's also actually a significant amount of research that is saying that alarmism is is more powerful in actually moving societies. So we tend to read the negative news. We're looking for things to be worried, stressed, and like concerned about as communities rather. So if you report on good things, development that is happening, people don't seem to really, they really don't get that excited about it. So it's like good, good, good. And as soon as there's something that triggers this alarm, this fight or flight in us, then suddenly there's a lot of things happening. So I think that there's, and this brings back to this idea that maybe on a bigger level, as individuals, as communities, we need to pivot. We need to pivot our minds in a way that we actually get as much energy out of good news, really good news, as we get out of all of these things that are going the wrong way. What we focus on is what we're going to get. So I would very much challenge that we're living in this paradox, great things happening, not necessarily remembering to celebrate all of the success stories, but at the same time, we have a lot of really big concerns, and those seem to be dominating this narrative. And that's definitely, I don't have any answers, but this is something that I hope that we'll be able to change in the near future.
We will for sure. That I am confident of. Sara, you get to say a few words now as well. Then maybe we have time for one more, but I only say maybe because time is running.
Yeah. Only, or is there any questions maybe on YouTube or so? Otherwise I can okay, then I'll go ahead. So a lot of interesting things which are being said here, and I want to comment a little bit on everything. So I 3 short points. I'll try to keep them short. First, on what Katarina said, raising this thing with energy companies and communities. There's now in Yes Europe, I saw both at the annual conference last year and at the annual conference this year that we had in Yes Europe. There was a lot of talk on energy communities. So it doesn't have, and it's basically you locally or regionally are connected with others, and you can exchange energy. If you produce, you can sell to someone else. And that's what I said in my very first words, to have more distributed local electricity production, for example, solar power on your roofs, then you're much more resilient. Or you can also have wind power cooperatives. In general, I think cooperatives is a very good way to have, instead of a profit driven company, which is only focusing on getting as much profit as possible, not looking so much into sustainability. I think cooperatives can be a much better way to drive an economic organization and invest the profits into the organizations and give it back to the not shareholders of stocks, but give it back to the co-owners in the cooperative. So that's really, so energy communities, cooperatives, also in local communities. We talked about neighbors, comparing yourself to neighbors. Just a short comment on neighbors. I think that's also a way, if you get to know your neighbors better. Today, especially in Sweden, we are so individualized. You almost don't talk or meet your neighbors. But if you just start saying hello to your neighbor and talk more with them, do some small events we had here in our house, we were doing some barbecuing a few weeks ago, then you really are more resilient. In cases of urgency, if the electricity goes away, maybe you can ask your neighbor, hey, do you have this or something? Or if
another important behavioral aspect for how we survive. That's back to the human instincts again.
Exactly.
Katarina, any final remark from your side? You're having your hand up. You're muted.
So sorry, I was so excited. A quick remark on what Tina said about alarming headlines being the ones that we tend to go to and read more about. Yes, but in the same way, what's really important, and everyone who works with communication has a truly important role here, and specifically the media, is that we need to end with a call to action. Because just alarming headlines and doomsday stories about how screwed we are basically is not what's going to change us to do better and to want to be a part of the solution. We need to end every communication part, every article, every media with a call to action, hands-on call to action on what we can do on an individual level that feels motivating and also engaging for us. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
And
and more
with-
positive visions, positive future visions. Think about how do you want your future to be. Think about that and work towards that.
Like the saying, with great media and communication skills comes great responsibility. That's almost like Spider-Man, but not really. But
so that's my call to action today. So everyone who's working with communication, make sure that you end all your communications with a clear call to action.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone in the panel.